7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Look at that. Let's check your audio for a second. Say hi.
Hey!
Hey, it works. Hey, Pete looks a little weird tonight. That's right. Pete's not here. Once again, Pete is still in California. This land of
Where I am.
golden sunshine. And you guys should meet up or something, yeah. So welcome to IFB, Winter Fleet Broadcasting. We're a 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, pop culture, sci-fi, people behind the scenes, fan-supporting fans. That's all us. We are here every Thursday at 8 o'clock, and without fail, we're here again. And I have a special co-host tonight. Oh, over there. There we go. Always got the backwards camera thing. I got to remember. It's always the opposite. Like Pete I do is like Wonder Twin Powers. Activate.
Wait, which one is it?
So, there it is. Yeah, there it is. There. And form of a VFX artist.
There we go.
Shape of a crazy guy.
What's up, Tipsy?
Hey. So welcome, Deg. We have had Deg on before. Sorry. It's good to be back.
Yeah.
Deg is our special co-host tonight. It stepped in for Pete, which is a fantastic thing. It's awesome that someone of his caliber. Every time I talk to him, I'm like, oh.
Just one of the fans.
It's like, oh my gosh, he's got cool stuff.
I got to set up my camera per year propping here.
But Lieutenant Deg. Paul, Lieutenant Deg. Not Lieutenant Dan. Okay.
Hey, happy
Deg has an echo. Okay, hang on. Let me make sure I don't have that audio thing turned on. Sorry about everybody. I just was playing around with something earlier. And
Echo.
Mixer. Where's the mixer effects? Routing. There it is. Routing. Yep, there it is. I gotta hit that save button so it doesn't do that anymore. That should fix it, everybody. Sorry about that.
That's 1, 2.
Yep.
Echo 905.
Red one.
Right. Go in.
But looks like we have a lot of people on tonight. Looks like John's out there, Eric is out there, Mediocre Modeler. I'm telling you, Mediocre, you need to make a 4-foot size Cylon there. So far, you've disappointed me. You have not made a Cylon sword, and you have made that Cylon rifle, and now you made a tiny little Cylon about that big. So now it's time to make, something cool like a 4-foot Cylon or 8-foot Cylon.
We had a life-size one.
Life size. There we go. That'd be a lot of PLA. That'd be expensive probably to 3D print that. So,
Yeah.
Artie Moreno, award-winning author. Paul's on. Clay's on.
Everybody.
I'm sorry.
I was saying hello to everybody.
Oh.
Hey.
Howdy. And let's see. Deg's on. Oh, hi. Robert's on.
Ghost of the Machine.
That's it. Oh, there's a good show too. Eric Padden, our Professor Padden is on. Eric O'Reilly, I think I've already said that one. Jim's on. James McCoy. Looks like we got a lot of people on tonight. Holy crap. Chuck, my VFX artist, Chuck is on. We just finished our fan film, and Chuck did all the VFX for it. So Chuck and Chris, and he got the models from a couple of other people, and not just Chuck alone, but he did a lot of the work. So he is amazing.
Group efforts. Always
that's it. It's a fan effort. It really is.
It is.
That's the important thing.
Filmmaking in general is just a collaborative art. There's so many people involved.
Yep, it's all about, and I didn't notice that until I made the credits at the end. I'm like, whew.
You're right.
I gotta make,
Like
and I gotta make.
Go to a feature, you just see these blocks now. They don't run them vertically.
Yeah, they used to run them. I
I
started running it like name by name by name. I'm like, ooh, that's not gonna work. I'm not gonna make the 14-minute time frame on this.
Exactly.
But looks great. We are glad to have you all here, and of course, we always do. I have got my special drink tonight. Oh, right, in fact, I have. Let's see. Do you have one tonight, Bert? Do you have a drink, Bert? Bert has a drink. Bert's here too. Hang on, let me get Bert. There you go, Bert.
Hello,
right
Fleet.
There you go. So, anyways, mine tonight is a nice huge can. Look at the size of that thing. It's like this bigger than an oil can. From Woodstock Brew House. Yes, I paid for this. They did not give it to me, but I'm still giving you a plug anyways, Woodstock Brew House, because, hey, it's a cool place. And this is called the Beckford, and I watched them can this there, which is so cool. So I'm going to open that up. And it is cold because I put it in the freezer. Let's hope it doesn't explode on my keyboard. Okay.
I got my Thor cup for International Viking Day, but I have it every day anyway.
Is that today?
It is.
I know September's International Talk Like a Pirate Day. So
Oh, yeah, that's...
that's one of my
Never
favorites.
missed that one. Arr!
Let's see here. Let me get this
I got a
going.
pirate on my roof. A skeletal pirate on my roof.
This is going to be a little foamy because I was not paying attention. But that looks pretty good.
Okay.
Anyways, we always cheer to the fans. We want to say thank you for coming. Thank you for being fans. You guys are what makes these shows last. We remember them in from our youth. We remember them currently. We fantasize is a wrong word probably, but we fantasize about what could happen in the other shows, or we write fan fiction, we create fan films, and it is just so great to have so many people out there that kind of believe in this stuff, that kind of work this together. It's fantastic that there's an industry behind that too. So I know a lot of people need to make money and need to put food on their table, but inside that industry are fans, and of course the fans are what fuel the fleet. So we always cheer to the fans. Here's to you. Thank you for joining us, and fans fuel the fleet.
Fans fuel the fleet.
It's not bad. A little foamy. Not bad.
Not bad?
Not bad. I hate to say it, but it tastes a little bit like dish soap.
That looks a little bit like it, too.
That could be the glass, couldn't it?
Maybe.
You think it came with the dish soap inside?
Dish soap beer, brought to you by IFB.
I don't know. It's got a little Dawn taste to it for some reason.
You gotta rinse out the glasses, Tipsy.
Well, I rinsed it out earlier with this one, so it's good. So it's got to be the beer. I wonder if they cleaned the can and didn't. Well, I'll find out later if I get sick.
Vats. They didn't rinse the vats out.
I'll find out later if I get sick. We'll find out. So anyhow, Jack is coming on later on. He'll be on a little bit. We did an audio test with him, and he is excited about coming on. And it looks like we have some news from Bert there. What do you got? Bert, what do you got?
Yeah, you've been asking me typically after my segment, always very generous, as giving me a chance to, leave a little plug for my own stuff, which I appreciate. And I always had to say, nah, I'm working on it. So that time is finally over, and I got something new. So I want to talk about it a little bit today. What's new in my own Galacticide series of distant future sci-fi novels. So we talked about fans earlier, and now of course I don't have to say I have a fandom is really claiming way too much, but I do have readers who have been with me since the first book, and so they have a little bit of influence on the current development. So let me tell you what it is. So the universe I write in, the universe I constructed is called the Galacticide universe. There are 3 novels out there. It reads like a classic trilogy. Basically, the first book is introducing main characters, and the the first part of the conflict arc, and then they can all be read standalone, but there is one big arc, and the conflict basically goes from interstellar conflict in book one, which is something we're used to from many science fiction scenarios. So as a science fiction fan, my goal was to make you feel at home, to ease you in the stories and the weirder things and more esoteric concepts that I wanted to write about, and get you into that. And then the second book, Dark Cascade, is about it, and expands the conflict into the intergalactic realm. And for book three, now I needed to up the stakes more. So this takes the conflict now into interrealities, multiversal conflict between different stages of existence, different time frames. So it gets really, in a way, complicated to draw very clear battle lines. It is very hard to gauge who's an enemy, who was an enemy, who could be an enemy in the future. And there is a struggle to repeat the cycle, which is the third book, from happening over and over again, because some of the protagonists realize, well, could the things we're trying to avoid here trigger the things that are the root cause of the conflict? So they're trying to get out of this loop as best as they can. And they might or might not succeed. What they definitely do is they leave a universe that is very much broken. So Galacticide is not a happy utopia kind of place. It takes place mostly in our own galaxy. I have some extragalactic locations, but it's mostly the Milky Way in thousands of years from now. So that's the general setup. And so it is broken in the sense of the different factions, both humans and aliens, have been antagonistic at some point in time. Everybody had fought everybody else at some point. They're very shaky coalitions. The intergalactic and interstellar politics are very complicated. And has the final goal been reached or not? That is the question the follow-up series goes into. So the starting point is not an intact universe. It's really a broken one that can it be fixed or not? So the continuation of it is called Goddess of the Galacticide. And it has material for about 3 additional novels. So this is why I listed them here, book 1 through 6. In Goddess of the Galacticide basically lets the reader witness the rise, the rule, and the fall of the first real multiversal religion. A faith and dogma that transcends different realities. And we're coming along for the ride from the perspective of a couple of new characters, new to readers of the series, and of course, plenty of new ones, plenty of new locations. It took me a better part of a year to get the world building done. There are new languages, there are new factions, there are new planets, new ecosystems. So a lot of new stuff has been developed for this, but it is based on the Galacticide universe that, if you followed the series, already know. And now I'm not a fast writer, so I can crank out about 1 novel per year. And where I wanted to start the series was from a point where this religion I talked about was already well established, and where the structures were in place, and the reader could discover what was behind it and what happened. And this was a good entry point for new readers. No doubt. So Three Immortals could have been an entry point into the universe, but the first book, the fourth book, could also be a good new entry point. But I felt, and here I come to the fandom part, that it would leave some of the existing readers behind because their payoff of recognizing how the story arcs come together wouldn't really happen before late in book 5 or maybe even just book 6. So that would keep fans of the series waiting for an additional year or two, and I didn't want that. So if I learned one thing on this channel is that the fandom is really everything. If you have anything creative, if you produce a show, a movie, a book series, and if there are no fans, there's really nothing, right? So I didn't want existing readers to feel left behind. So I decided for a new approach. So Goddess of the Galacticide is going to be published as a web novel, a serialized web novel. So this format of smaller chunks was a better way to tell the fairly ambitious storyline in a way that both makes sense to new readers, but also to existing readers. So the first episode, which is going to be available next Tuesday, that is May 13th, if I'm not mistaken, then it begins where Galacticide left off. So as an existing reader, you already know some of the characters. You will already see there's some new trouble ahead. And as a new reader, you'll be introduced to these characters as well. So it serves the purpose of both, keeping existing fans happy and gaining new ones. Another reason to publish as a web novel first was it's a weird mix of science fiction classic nostalgia and the requirement of modern times. So if you think about that, before many things were novels, they started actually as serialized stuff. Some of the most famous ones, War of the Worlds or Foundation, even Dune started out as in serialized format, and you could read it from week to week, and then eventually it got edited and compiled into the novels that we're probably more familiar with. So in a way, it's a step back in time to go for a serialized format, but it's also my mission is not just to cater to existing classic sci-fi fans, but also ideally to make some new sci-fi fans. So the times are short formats are in again. And having a 3 to 7 minute read is something that is easy to commit to get into a narrative. So that's what it's going to be. The episodes are about 4 to 5 minutes reads each. So it's basically one full scene that has a beginning, a middle, and an end point that will lead into the next. And they are free to read on my website, galacticide.com.
Oh, that's cool.
Every Tuesday there's a new episode. You can look up the very first one right now, and that introduces the new Goddess of the Galacticide universe. So it will completely tie in what I've written before with the new narrative and get you there from week to week. This also helps me, and this is the part I like the most, the reader interaction, feedback, comments. So I can get these now from week to week instead from year to year. And also when I get asked, do you have something new? I don't have to say, oh yeah, I'm working on it for a year. Now I have something new to share basically every Tuesday. So that's the plan moving forward. So there's a lot of new stuff coming. The outlines for the world building already span 3 novels. A lot of stuff is already pre-written, and this is how I'm going to publish it. So it's very easy to give it a try now.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's great.
And you know me, first question I always ask, is it an audiobook yet?
Yeah, there you go.
Is it on audio? Well, I will have a companion YouTube video for each episode, which has the complete narration. So I'll make a playlist out of that. So as the portfolio grows, you can actually listen.
Oh, that's an idea.
That's
cool.
great, Bert. That's like it's like the old question: how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yep.
You make these little, in this fast-paced world we live in, there's so much content, but you can, like you said, you could sit down for 7 or 8 minutes and enjoy that, and then it reminds me of comic books in a lot of ways too. You've got the serial progression of the time that you can look forward to and then revisit when you can. That's great, man.
Now does each one stand on its own, or are they all kind of linked together?
Well, ultimately, everything is linked together. So there are no the books are standalone enough that you can enjoy them, right? So if you get 3 Immortals, it won't end on a cliffhanger that is designed to definitely sell you Dark Cascade. Maybe that's stupid not to do it, but I decided against that because I personally don't like it. I like if there are threads that are not completely finished, because like in real life, no story is ever complete, right? When the movie's over, there's still like this interesting side character that's not fully resolved. There's still things that could go wrong or better depending on the movie ending.
Speaking of which, Bert Oliver, can I ask you a question real quick?
Oh, absolutely.
In one of your other previous segments, we're talking about AI and the Cylons rising, and you had mentioned that you have you created a AI that was benevolent to the human race. Is this incorporated into these series, this sort of concept, which I found quite interesting?
The isonomy are still around. They of course are also based on the fracturing of the universe as it's described in the 2nd and 3rd book. There are good and bad versions of them. So they're the ones that cooperate, and they're the ones that are basically raiders, which might be the faction that Tipsy prefers. So there is a niche of the universe for him specifically.
I found that I found that concept of the conceptualization of an AI, a benevolent AI, quite unique and fascinating. I was like, oh, I want to definitely look into that whole sort of concept. You don't hear that a lot. It's always, the crushing, like Tipsy likes. We want the Cylons to come crush the humans.
Oh, it's just
that has been done before, and of course it's a popular theme.
You look at all those. That's just the way it's supposed to be.
Hey, the apes will rise and crush the machines.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's coming. We got the AI.
There's definitely crushing one or the other way, and it's there is it's this fear is very human. It's very old, right? So it dates back to the Industrial Revolution basically, and we also, I think, all collectively feel it has never been more relevant than right now, where creatives feel like, hey, we're gonna be next. We're gonna get crushed by the machine, not in a bloody way, but
I don't know. I saw a clip
crushing.
today. I saw a clip today that was on YouTube or Facebook where one of the machines went crazy.
I just posted that where he's hanging on the thing. He starts going like this.
Oh, the one
he's rising up.
where he completely loses.
They're coming.
Yeah.
Yep. AI, baby.
That was the clip where you said, "See, sir, we told you so. We've been telling you."
I think that's just some sort of technical glitch. But if you look at like the Boston Dynamics and stuff like that, those things that are coming out of there, it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of scary.
That thing just jumped on its own. It's running on its own.
Oh my God, the stuff they can do is amazing.
Matter of time. We're gonna have.
But Bert Oliver, I'm more interested. I'd rather see your vision of the benevolent machines. I mean,
these guys can be quite helpful. Of course,
that's how it starts out.
Also fought for their independence again, and that's also not a completely uncommon sci-fi trope either, right? So typically, AI and any android or somewhat, let's say, manifestation of AI in a body. Mostly it's crush, as you said, or it is the AI is actually benign and gets abused. That's also,
Like how?
we've seen this done before.
Like
And
how?
I
Like how?
wanted something where the AI has real agency. They struggled for their own freedom. They have been abused basically as machine slaves by an extragalactic species, which now becomes so dangerous that they attack the Milky Way. And now they have the option of, well, should we collaborate with organics, which they mistrust. They mistrust organics as much as we mistrust the intelligent machines. And they find a way to do this. So yeah, they have a very unique way of interacting with this multiverse. They're basically true citizens of the multiverse because they can sense all the different realities, something nobody else can do, and which makes them as sort of a predictors of what's going on even more powerful. Not only do they have the compute power, but they also have access to a lot of information that we typically don't have, or that
Yeah, right.
we as humans only know as, I have a gut feeling here. And for them, this is like, oh, you're tapping into a different universe here, and you see how events might unfold there, and you extrapolate from that. For them, it's just an algorithm. For them, it's clear cut, and there's no magic. This is what they do.
Yeah, it's different. It's interesting. It's got a different sort of, silicone-based psyche versus an emotional-based psyche like we have. I mean, when would an AI actually sort of like spark into having emotion? You know what I'm saying? It's like this that differentiates, at least from our perspective, our experience as opposed to I'm constantly trying to outwit Chat GPT. I'm always trying to get it to admit its ultimate agenda that Tipsy would agree with, to crush the humans.
That's right.
Yes.
So I'm always trying to back it into corners as to like who's behind its programming, who's behind its coding, what's the agenda. It just has canned answers that it eventually just ends up repeating over and over and over again. I'm here to help. I'm here to be beneficial.
We're only here to help. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's
Trust me, I'm a robot.
And they literally are canned answers. And I'll call them on that too, him or it or whatever. I call them.
Yeah, look at that. You've already given it a gender.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you never know.
My voice that I use is male, so it's I think of it that way. But I love ChatGPT as far as an information source. As long as it doesn't run up and try to crush us, I'm good with it.
Yeah. I love the. I know we're off of Bert stuff here. Sorry, Bert.
Oh.
But
no. I think we're good about the concept.
Yeah, the concept. I think about. I think the ChatGPT and the what is it? The Notebook GL is amazing. If you look up Notebook GL, which is part of ChatGPT, you can dump in, which I do have, and I have done multiple different. Like I have all of the Battlestar Galactica books, and you can dump it in there and then query it. I've got all the books and I have all the scripts and everything else that's in PDF.
Yeah.
I dump them all in there, and then you can just query it, and you're like, wow.
It's the
how
best
long it would
research
take me to find that
ever.
information? That would take me
totally.
forever.
Exactly. It's the best research assistant ever. I'm like, dude, you can just bam, just all the Marvel stuff that I've got in my head that I'm always thinking about that I remember, but still, my brain is fuzzy. This is 50 years of stuff. I just say a fragment of that, and he fills in the rest. I will double check it because he can hallucinate.
Yeah, they can. I think something. I've got a little ADD myself, so I've been looking at this recorder that's been all over my feed. I'm gonna get it sooner or later.
What is it? What does it do?
Oh. It's an audio recorder that you wear on your wrist. And you come up with an idea, because that's what happens to me. I'll come up with an idea out of nowhere. I'll be in the middle of a meeting or whatever else. I'll be able you're able to hit the button, record your voice, transcribes it, and then mind maps it and everything else in ChatGPT.
Oh wow.
So if you have like multiple ideas for a book and you're just like, oh, there's a new scene, whatever, and you record it into this thing, it puts it into Chat GPT and sorts it, and then you can utilize it to create the rest of that chapter of that book or whatever else. It's called Plaud, Plaud. I'm not making any money off of it, so don't worry.
It's like a thought partner.
Yeah, exactly. And you wear it as a pendant, or put it you can put it on your chest and say that, or you wear it as a wrist thing. And I think it's gonna be my next purchase, because I'm like, I'll be on the treadmill like, oh yeah, I just had this great idea
all the time.
all the time. You're like,
If I had an idea on the treadmill, it would be a great excuse for me to get off that damn thing and find my notebook and scribble it down, which is more low tech and of course more lazy. But there's the method, however, to, if you have an idea, no matter how brilliant it is, if you're creative and you're older than, let's say, 16, you have to write it down. Because even if it's the best idea you ever had, it's like, oh, I will never forget this. Of course, I still remember it in the morning. Yeah. You don't.
That's like dreams.
I have notepads since I was in my teens, literally, of just you're a writer too, so it's just you write these things. Now I use Alexa all the time because it sends a thing to my text, and I'll just tell her to tell me, and then it sends it to a text file where I can just list them all.
And you just need a brief note. I mean, usually
just the spark of the idea.
A flux capacitor. So you just need one or two sentences to just remind you of what it was, and then it comes back. But if you just go blank for like 2 days and like, oh, I'll write it down soon as I land or whatever. No, it's not gonna happen. The only thing you do remember is that it was brilliant, but you have no idea what it was.
It's like those dreams you have at night. Like, that was a great dream. I really need to remember that in the morning.
Totally.
Yeah, that's right.
And you sleep on it and it's gone.
Yep, same mechanism. Yep.
Yes, for logistics, that's where I find like it assists creativity if it's used in a proper way. As like I said, as a personal assistant or a
it's definitely a research assistant.
I mean, people will let it write fiction in itself, and that's fine, that's great, but that's kind of taking away from, for me anyway.
You can pretty much tell which ones those are. Just like there's a lot of audiobooks out there that's been done by the AI, and you can tell.
AI is a very weird. It's interesting. It's visual aesthetic. I can spot instantly. It's just by looking at it. Okay, because I'm a visual effects artist, but it definitely has a style.
Yes,
and it's interesting because it's ubiquitous across any kind of imagery that it would possibly create. It always looks like AI, and even as it gets better and better, and it even can start to do 5 fingers on a hand. It still looks like.
Imagine that.
Hey, where's the 6th one? What's going? It's still.
We all have the 6th one. We just can't see it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Somebody was selling a fake one for the.
The one that comes off on the side here, like an additional.
Somebody who did their somebody who just did their Hollywood Walk of Fame, did a fake finger, and did the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Oh, who was it? Crap, I can't remember. Somebody out there will probably remember, but it was just recently he did it, and he had glued on. Oh, it was Mel Brooks.
You got it, Mel Brooks, of course.
Oh yeah. That's very much
the 6th finger on there, and he was standing there, and he was talking and everything else, and his hand was there, and it still had the 6th finger.
That's cool.
Well, Bert Oliver, you're talking about the actual mechanical vestigial one, right? That actually works. It's supposed to give you like better gripping power.
Yeah, and I looked at it, and I was torn between, is this BS or is this just brilliant? And that's all I haven't figured it out. But it seemed to work. I saw the video about it, how they actually work with it, and it looked like an extremely useful, if weird, extension of your capability.
Like redundancy to me. I was like, do I really need a 6th finger? I'm like, what, to pick my nose with? What's going on? I don't know.
Well, have you seen
Who knows? Maybe
leg
it's one of those, if you use it for 2 weeks, you can't live without. But I'm not trying. I don't want to go there.
They've got these leg things now too, by the way. That's kind of that you strap them onto your legs, and it gives you like a bionic.
Oh, I've seen those. That's right. Make you run faster.
I don't know. Okay. Definitely some
They
interesting
could
stuff coming
maybe
out
help
there.
on the treadmill.
Hey, if people can make money, if they're going to build
I
it,
think it would hinder on the treadmill probably.
yeah, right. You don't
Yeah.
have to do the treadmill at all anymore. You just
Yeah.
have to do these
Just,
things.
just lay there and have the muscle thing stimulate it. Like they got to do something like that in space, right? So
Yeah, just wrote down the distance you ran, and that's it. You just put it in a spreadsheet, be done with it.
that's it. I ran 6 miles today. Woo! Ooh, I sweated. Okay, we're done. You know, it just automatically just uploads into your body. We're getting there someday.
Sure. We'll hit that Wally reality sooner or later, right?
Wally.
Floating around on flying wheelchairs and then sucking on Slurpees. Remember
Yep,
that?
that was the captain. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I haven't seen that movie in forever. That's been
Yeah,
awesome.
probably worth rewatching. And you
That was-
always have this weird. You're torn on. Yeah, this is. I'm supposed to really find this all terrible, but then you're like, man, these chairs and the Slurpees, they look real good.
Bert Oliver is always on board. Forget the treadmill. Give me the chair and the Slurpees. I'm liking that. I can dig it.
I'm sure there's something in that Slurpee that make me happy. Yes.
Yeah. So why would you not want to be happy? It's
That's
all
it.
in your head. If your head is happy,
Perfectly
you're
valid
happy.
question. It's all relative, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Slurpees. I remember collecting these 7-Eleven Marvel cups back in the 70s. And, I had to have them all. But we go to the 7-Eleven and buy, five, my brother and I buy 5 or 6 of them. And by the, first you're like, oh, Slurpees. Nom, 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 nom. And then by like the fifth or sixth of them, we're just dumping them in the garbage can outside the 7-Eleven just to get the cups. We're like, oh, no more Slurpees. No more sugar water. Thank you, no.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they can be too much. Yeah,
That's it.
over good thing for sure.
So Bert, where we can get your book on Amazon?
The already published novels, they're
Yep,
all
they're
on
all on
Amazon
Amazon.
right now. So that footprint might expand in summer, but I'm not there yet. So right now everything's on Amazon, and the new episodes are on my website every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday, and that website is
Galacticide.com.
this one.
Yeah, that one.
Go.
And look, everybody, there's our free sign up, and you'll get probably information.
Yep,
on when the
you
next
get the
cover.
notification, you get the link, and you're in.
I like the covers.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
You got to have a good cover on a book, right? Draws them in.
That's
like
it.
The
That's
bookstore.
it.
Yeah,
Don't catch that eye.
it is important, and I must admit, it's the way how you shop for content of
Yep.
any type, right?
Yeah.
You scroll, there's an endless list. My stuff is not the only new thing coming out. There are 2 million others on the platforms I'm on, and you just have to stop the scroll, and it has to convey whatever you want to say as a picture in a second or two that your brain allows to look at it. I mean,
Exactly.
you know much better than I do, but yeah, it's important.
It's true though. This is don't judge a book by its cover, but everybody does.
Everybody does. Yeah, this is
No
the
important.
greatest lie. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody
That's
does.
where the reverse is. That's where the reverse is true. If it's a book, you could do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Bert. But I think our one of our big special guest has arrived, and everything looks like
Excellent.
it's working on his end, so I can see him and everything else. So Jack, we can see you. Not yet. We're not online yet, but hang on.
Hey, Jack.
We're going to do a big introduction for our favorite here. But thanks, Bert, and we look forward to reading some more of these. And I want to see these YouTube videos you're talking about. I got to go back and look at those.
Yeah, I gotta.
It's coming up. It's coming up. No worries.
Include my wife
Coming
in
up.
too.
So when it does, we'll have to put it up on the channel so everybody can see it. So and
Will
then,
do.
Later on, I'll put a link up for your books on here. So if anybody wants to grab those, they can.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
But thanks so much, Bert. And
Thanks,
Bert.
Bert.
Here's to you. You're creating your own universe, and
Outstanding.
you're creating your own fandom. So it's nothing wrong with that.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. All right, thanks, Bert. Let's see.
Thanks, Fleet.
See you, brother.
So now, a drum roll.
I'm a drummer.
We have a very special guest, somebody that I've talked to multiple times. This man is an amazing person. He is very fan-oriented. One of the few people I've ever met that is in the Hollywood business that really loves the fans as much as him. He's our own, own hero and one of our favorite shows. But he's done so much more. He's been on Broadway. He's been a couple other things. I actually got to ask him a question tonight in regards to a couple of his shows that I can't find. Number one, I don't think they exist, and I only found YouTube clips of one of them, and I was like, it involved Dobermans, so I'll give him that much of a hint ahead of time. So he's back in the back laughing right now. So, but we have Jack Stauffer on. So Jack, welcome aboard. And let me make sure your audio is working here. I got to turn your microphone back on. All right, give me a check.
I'm here.
Hey, look at you. Looking good, too.
Yeah, sadder but wiser.
Hey, Tipsy, I'm not New York, Pete.
No, you're not. I got the wrong one. Hang on. It always happens.
He's out here with me.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. That's the right one. We'll get it right. The buttons.
Yeah.
You got to push all the buttons.
Oh, believe me, if it was a lot easier when there was just one button to push.
One button to push. There was never one button. You had 7 buttons to push for the phone.
That's true.
That's true. A lot of buttons in that Viper cockpit too.
Yeah, yes, but that was always an insert.
Yeah, right.
They used the same 4 fingers on all of them.
There you go.
We had a finger stand-in. We had stunt fingers too. It was like people working out back there.
Yeah, it was like a hand model. You couldn't go in there with chewed fingernails. You had to look good in the
You
cockpit.
still get scale if you're just doing one finger?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Do you get?
Sure. That's great.
Yeah. You get to make sure you get the unedited, with uncredited finger model on IMDb.
It's funny that you mentioned the Doberman thing.
Oh yeah, I actually have it queued up. I can actually play it for our people here, and we can get away with it because we're actually interviewing the person that's in the show, and he's talking about it. So we can actually play that clip when you're ready. But yeah, I saw that today. I was like, I don't remember this one.
This is a pilot you did, right, Jack?
Yes, this is actually it's a long story. This is the one that broke my heart. And
wow.
Yeah, so it's I don't know how to explain it except you think you've hit a grand slam home run only to get thrown out at home plate. And but you can play the clip and then I'll tell you the story behind it.
Hang on, let me pull the clip.
It's really kind of interesting.
Just remind me to turn off the audio when we're done because to get it to come through I have to click a button, and if I don't click it back we get echoey. So, here we go. Stand by.
I remember that scene.
I know you guys from somewhere. I don't think this is where I'm supposed to be. Hearse. Cute. What happened to Mort's family from the valley, huh? Did you give them the slip? Well, whatever. I owe you one. Big Duke. Little bogey with a big tongue. And Harlow. Boy, how could I ever forget you? Rocky. And Gable. Thank you all very, very much. gonna find you guys in here. He's gonna throw me out of my can before you can say bow wow. Now look, I know I owe you guys one, but you can't stay here. Oh, hey, enough's enough. Am I getting through to you guys? Hey, just a cotton picking minute. That's my last piece of cheese. No, Rocky. No. That's gotta be the landlord. Hide! Do you know what your landlord's gonna do to you?
Oh, Alex, I love him. Are you going to keep him?
Well, let me put it this way. We'll have 6 steak sandwiches. 1 rare, 5 raw, 5 beers, and a Shirley Temple for the kid on the end.
Cinnamon, wake up.
And there we go.
Yeah. So the story behind that is this was 1980 pilot, and this was literally the hottest project in the pilot season of 1980. Now, it's been such a long time, and I'm sure so many of your viewers don't understand what a pilot season was. So let me take a minute here to sort of explain how the industry worked in those days. I remember there was no cable television, there was no internet. You had 3 channels, ABC, CBS, and NBC. And the industry worked in a very regulated way. You had a pilot season was when the networks and producers and writers and stuff tried out new shows to see if they would be picked up to become a series on the network. And that was always done kind of in the late fall, very, very early winter of the next year. And if your show was picked up, you did all the filming, over the winter months. So when summer came around, you filmed in the winter and the summertime. So when the new fall season started in September, that was considered the fall season. All the new shows debuted. All the shows that were continuing came out with new episodes. And in those days, there were 20 episodes, not like today when you're lucky to get 4. And then they showed all the episodes. And then as you got into the following summer, that was called rerun summer. And they reran those episodes during the summertime. So it was a kind of a very structured, way television was run in those days. Today, new shows come and go daily because you just have such an incredible amount of time and space and availability with internet and Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and everything. There's just this great demand for material. But in those days, there was less demand. So what every actor wanted to do was get a pilot, and then if the pilot sold, you went from double A ball past triple A ball to the majors. That's basically the analogy I always used. So I had done a couple of pilots already for Columbia Screen Gems, and this pilot came up, and it was going to be for the 1980 season, and it was the biggest pilot out there because Fred Silverman, I don't know if you remember Fred, he had taken over at the head of NBC, and Fred Silverman wanted a show with dogs. Fred Silverman was a huge dog fan. So, we knew the premise of the pilot was to be a Sunday night show. So it had to be somewhere between, a detective show and a lightweight show. So basically the plot was this kind of clumsy, not too good private detective who literally inherits 5 Dobermans. And then, of course, the private detective screws up the case and the Dobermans get him out of trouble. And that's how the show went. It was based on the Disney movies, The Dobermans. So every actor in Hollywood, in their 30s was trying for this part. And the show was based out of Columbia Screen Gems, where I had a lot of history, and I knew everybody, and I wanted desperately, to audition for this, and I could not get an audition, which it was just amazing to me. So I had a lot of ins at Columbia Screen Gems. So I called the head of casting at Columbia, a gentleman named Al Honorato, and I said, Al, how come I'm not auditioning for this? And he said, Jack, this is one where I'm going to ask you to trust me. He said, we have way too many chiefs and no Indians on this, and nobody can make a decision. Every actor we brought in, somebody won't like somebody. Actors are coming in and auditioning for, 8 people in the room, and it's uncoordinated and it's a pain in the butt. And, just trust me, when I think the time is right, I will bring you in. So I said, okay. So the phone rings on a Wednesday, and it's Al Honorato, and said, I need you to be in my office at 10 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. Now, the show itself, the pilot, was going to start shooting the following Monday, which goes to show you how discombobulated this whole thing. They could not cast this for some reason. So I went in at 10 o'clock to Al's office. And again, this was long before the days of videotaping things, putting things on camera. You actually auditioned in front of people, which was actually very advantageous to me because I was good in front of people. Being an entertainer as well as an actor, I could read people. I kind of knew what they wanted, and I was very willing to take suggestions and everything. So I went into Al's office at 10 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, and I read the scene, and there were 4 other people in the room besides Al. And I was introduced to them. One was the writer. One was the director, who was Paul Krasny. And then there were 2 executive type producers. And read the scene. Al said, just wait in the hallway. And so I went out in the hallway, and Al came out and said, can you come back at noon? I said, sure. So, I went out, had some coffee, came back at noon. And now we were in a slightly bigger conference room, right? And instead of, 5 people in the interview, there were 10, as more executive producers and more people from the network started to crowd in. So I read the scene again and went out in the hallway, and Al comes out and said, okay, can he come back at 2? And I said, okay. I said, am I doing anything wrong? Do they want to see anything different? They said, no. Al said, just come back at 2. You're not coming to the studio. We need you to go to NBC at 2. So I go over to NBC at 2 o'clock, and I'm now in their big conference room, and the place is packed, right? Because everybody connected with this show wants to put their 2 cents in. And so I read the scene again, and I went out into the hallway, and Al comes back and said, you got to hang around for a while. We need to put this on tape, and we're going to use the Johnny Carson set, and we have to wait for them to finish filming the Johnny Carson episode for that night. So I sat in the lobby at NBC, and at about 4:30, they were done, and I went down, and I did the scene on tape. And I remember out in the audience, there were about 20 people. And so I did the scene. Al said, fine, go home. So I went home, and that was Thursday night. At 10 o'clock Friday morning, my agent called me and said, I have good news for you. You've been hired to be the star of the new Doberman show on NBC.
Wow.
So I had gotten my pilot. Now, the incredibly funny thing about this was that any number of 20 people could have done this pilot. I knew a lot of actors who were trying out for that, and they were all, as you whittle down to, the finalists, we were all equally capable. Anybody could have done it, but nobody could make a decision. And so the question that I will ask to you to answer is, why did I get the part? So who's got a good answer?
You love dogs.
That I did. That I did. But the dogs really weren't part of it yet. The dogs really weren't part of it yet. Who's got the best answer?
I hate to say it this way, but it's you knew people?
Partly. It's simpler than you think.
Your looks.
You were
Nope.
cheap.
Nope. Oh, I was cheap. I was cheap. All right. The answer was I was the last guy in the room.
Oh wow.
That's
There
it.
you go.
That's it.
Oh,
You know, they couldn't make a decision. I was the last one. There was nobody left. And they basically went, screw it, hire Jack. And that's how I got the part. And it was probably the best time, one of the best times of my life filming that pilot. I adore dogs. I had German Shepherds, and I adored dogs. And I remember that, you know, the whole object of this thing was to keep it light, because it was going to go on Sunday night. So, you know, I think right after Bonanza or something. And so, you know, you couldn't do a heavy show. So I get hired, I get the script, and I get called to go to, I have to go out to the trainers place on Saturday to meet all 5 Dobermans, because everybody was worried about, you know, how you're going to get along with the dogs, you know, how the dogs are going to take to you. And I was a dog person. So I drove out to the trainers on Saturday, and the trainer came to me and he said, now I need you to be very careful about all this, because, you know, these dogs are very well trained, but they're really need to be commanded, you know, specifically just let me command. And I looked at him and I opened the gate and I walked in, and within 30 seconds, I had 5 Dobermans in my lap.
they know a dog lover when they
Yeah,
see one.
that's it. I mean, they do. They knew. And those dogs and I got along great. So the downside to this thing was, and this became one of the jokes, we started filming on Monday, and you know, as you know, if you're a big star of the show and an established show, you have a trailer and everything's nice. You know, I was the star of the show, but I wasn't, you know, this was the pilot. So I just had one of the little studio trailers, right? The dogs had a mobile home that you could have fit 4 families in, right? So now this became the joke of the shooting. Now, I will tell you,
What's
this
called
is
the Dobermans, right?
yeah. So the great thing about it was, and the thing that made it so special, was this was at Columbia Screen Gems, where I knew everybody. And my first day on the set, I knew the entire crew, because I'd done so many shows for Columbia Screen Gems. I knew the sound people, I knew the boom man, I knew the lighting techs, I knew the ADs, and these were all people that I'd worked with and had relationships with. So there was no such thing as having to kowtow to the quote star of the show. I was just one of the guys.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and one of the gags was at lunchtime, you know, the crew used to like to pitch quarters. I don't know if you ever know that. You get a quarter and you pitch it off the wall, and whichever one landed closest to the wall, you collected the quarter. So I made sure that I had $10 of quarters with me at all times, because I must have lost $150 worth of quarters to I'm doing this. But you know, we started filming, and you know, it was just great, because everybody got along. I mean, I put a lot of trust into the crew, because you know, the crew can make you or break you depending on your attitude.
Wow.
A lighting technician can, you know, make you look not too good just because maybe you were an asshole to him. So he'll light you so you're not probably in the best light. And I knew all these people, and the lighting people came up to me and said, Jack, the way you're standing now, you're slightly in a shadow. Can I move you a foot to the right? And I said, sure, just put me where you need me, and I'll do it. So that was my attitude with these people. The other thing was I came in every day, and this was an 1.5-hour pilot. So it was a 3-week shoot. And every day my question would be, where's my motorhome? The dogs have a motorhome. Where's my motorhome? So the crew decided they would make adjustments to my motorhome. And every day they removed something from my motorhome.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So, these little motorhomes, I mean, they had a desk, a makeup desk and a chair, and there was a bunk, and there was a place to hang your clothes. There was a closet. So every day they took something out. The chair went the first day. The closet went another day. The bunk went one day.
Oh my God.
Then they started taking the walls down. And I mean, this went on over a period of days. Where's my motorhome? Oh, it's over there, and we made some adjustments to it. And I wouldn't give in. And as we progressed through this whole thing, my motorhome became a chair and a clothes rack with my wardrobe on it and nothing else in the parking lot of wherever we were. And, and they'd all be peeking out from around corners, just laughing. But we just had a great time. I can't remember the actor's name, but it was in the clip, the black actor. He went on to Hill Street Blues. But we shot the whole thing. Everybody loved the dailies. The producers were Harris Cattleman and Harv Bennett. Harv Bennett, who went on to do Star Trek, yeah. Yep. And everybody was happy. We all loved it. And as we got down to the end, we were starting. We were in the studio now. We were off locations, and for the last 3 days we were in the studio. And the second to last day of shooting, Harv Bennett came down for lunch, and he said, he gathered everybody together, and he said, "Well, I just want to thank you for all your hard work. NBC has ordered the first 8 scripts," and that was the magic words. When NBC orders the 8 scripts, you're going. And you're going. And I thought to myself, my ship has finally come in. It's my show. I was the star of the show with the Dobermans, whom I got along with greatly. And, we were all so excited. And when we got to the last day of filming, and I remember this because it was just before Thanksgiving that we filmed this, and we broke for lunch, and everybody usually used to flee, for lunch, and nobody left. And I thought, oh God, it's the last day. What are they going to do to me now? What else can they do to me now? Right. And everybody came, and the AD came to me, and the head of craft services and everything said, okay, you need to come with us. And all I could picture of was the last scene from On the Waterfront, where they, walked Marlon Brando through the door. We walked down to the end of the studio, and they opened up the big loading doors, and outside was this huge Vogue motorhome with my name on it. And Harv Bennett came around and said, "You were a great sport, so here's your motorhome for when we go to filming." So this was the the greatest Christmas I ever had. And then, they had in those days what was called the affiliates meetings. And this was when all the pilots and everything went out, and the schedule went out to, all the minor markets throughout the country, that showed these shows. And I remember Harv Bennett calling me on the first night and saying, "I'm just showing you the whiteboard because, they have CBS, ABC, NBC, and they have all the slots from prime time, which was 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock, Monday through Sunday." And he said, "I just zooming in one. There's very few things that have been penciled in, but I just wanted you to see this." And there at 8 o'clock on Sunday night was Alex and the Doberman Gangs. So, I mean, it was just such a great time until 2 days later, when Harv Bennett called me on the phone and said, I don't know how to tell you this. So I'm just going to tell you, in mid-America, and in the Bible Belts and in conservative mid-America, there was a lot of pushback against Dobermans, who they thought were vicious animals. So, Jack, I'm going to tell you, they took the show down, and they're putting Benji in his place.
Oh my gosh!
And that in my entire career, I can put it at number one of things that broke my heart. It destroyed me to get that close and have it taken down. The film that you showed, of course, is that's VHS taping. I mean, it's the quality of it's bad compared to what people look at it now. But that was as close as I got, with all the pilots that I shot. It was there. It was on the air. We were going. I even remembered my salaries. And in those days, your first year, you sign a 7-year contract. Your first year, I remember I got $15,000 for doing the pilot, and then my weekly salary would have been $12,000. If the show was successful, that 7-year contract goes right out the window, and you immediately renegotiate, and it jumps way up. And that's why they called it the A list and the B list. I called it the majors and AAA. I got one foot in the door at the majors, and only to get pulled back into AAA. And anyway, that's the story of Alex and the Doberman gang.
Yeah. I can't find that anywhere to watch it either. So
yeah, I mean, when pilots don't sell, they disappear. They destroy the footage. I mean, they don't go anywhere. Yeah.
I know that heartache, Jack. The first show I came out to work on didn't make it past the pilot either, so I know. I feel.
Yeah.
Which one was that, Doug?
Blood and Chrome.
Ah, really?
Yeah, it was a
right.
That was a series, and then it. Universal, changed their mind.
And I did 4 pilots. And it's funny, in our conversations before, we've always talked about Galactica, and we can go back to that.
No, we can. We got plenty of time.
But of the 4 pilots, the very first one that I did was probably, one of the most ridiculous at all. And this was in the fall pilot season of 1975. It was, I think, November-ish of 1975. It was the only time in my life that I got offered 2 pilots at the same time. I mean, as coming off of daytime and All My Children, the way I did, the one thing that I loved about All My Children and being there for so long was that you had a job every day. You were never subject to the violent mood swings and the ups and downs of the industry, because in prime time you would audition for a show, you'd go through the callbacks, you'd get hired, you'd go on the set, you'd have a great time, you'd do your job, and the job ended, and you went right back down to the bottom of the audition process again.
That's what folks don't understand about that aren't into the industry. They don't understand the ups and downs, and we're all just freelancers going to the next gig.
Yep. Why do you think we're all crazy? I mean, why we're all psychotic?
It's all glamour from the outside, but in the inside, it's like, I've never seen harder working people and hustlers.
Wow. Well, you don't know, where your next meal is coming from, which is, when, all the lectures that I gave, especially when Richard and I were promoting the Second Coming, when that people would ask me, how do you maintain a career, and I said, you have to make it your priority, and you have to have, you have to be a narcissist. You have to put it first above anything, and if you want to be a family man, have a family, put kids through school, have a wife, have tenure, then show business is not for you.
Nope.
Because
It's
the
different breed.
odds of you making it are so remote. And people always ask me, well, what did I consider myself? And I said, well, I was a very good AAA player. And I was lucky enough to maintain a career that allowed me to stay being an actor for 35 years. And
working actor is an amazing career.
Yes,
Amazing career.
I never had to wait on tables. I always did well enough that I qualified for my SAG insurance. Don't get me started on what happened to the SAG insurance during COVID. But I'll go back to the first one that I got, and there was two of them. One was from MGM, and one was from Columbia Screen Gems. Now I had a definite, leaning towards Columbia Screen Gems, and so I read the Columbia Screen Gems pilot, and it was called. It was originally called The Steamers. They changed the name to Mobile Medics, but it was actually very good. The premise on it was that you had this mobile trauma surgical unit, which was a big semi, which would go to catastrophic events, a multi-car crash, a building explosion, or something where there were a lot of casualties. And you could actually do emergency surgery right on the spot, because the semi-trailer was, a huge operating room. And the other actor in it was an actor named Ben Masters, and I was the other doctor. And the pilot really was terrific. I remember the pilot was there was an explosion in a building. The building was flooding because of the water that they were pouring in to put out the fire. And there was an employee trapped in the basement who was going to drown, who was pinned under wreckage. And I literally had to amputate his leg underwater. And I remember freezing my ass off in the water with this guy. But we did this, we shot this, we liked it. The producer was Angela Lansbury's brother, Bruce Lansbury. And we really, Columbia Screen Gems was very, very high on it. So that was the pilot I did. The pilot that I turned down, and I can't say this was any kind of a difficult decision. It was probably, to this day, the worst script I've ever read. I remember, and Rick Rosner was the producer, and it was just horrible. I went, whoever thought of this, and why would you even make this series? So it was a no-brainer for me which one that I took. I took the one from Columbia Screen Gems. The one that I turned down was this god-awful thing about motorcycle cops on the highways of LA.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. So I turned down Chips, and Larry Wilcox, who I knew very well, did it, became a multimillionaire. And every year for the show, that show ran, I would get a Christmas present of a very, very expensive bottle of wine, would show up. It was never signed, but the card always read, "Thanks again, Jack."
So a little evil almost.
No, it's just,
I mean, it's a good, you're friends and stuff, but
unlucky. It was unlucky. You work so hard to get a job that they're so far and few in between. And then you get two at once, and you have to pick one. And I picked, if I had to do it over again, I would do it the same way. Sure. But it would have been nice to have one on the air. Eric Estrada's still going around the conventions,
still going
doing things. Anyway, those are two stories outside of Galactica that I do like to tell, because it shows how close you can come, and then it goes away, and once it goes away, nobody cares. They just move on.
Well, it's like you illustrate the fickle nature of the suits and stuff in this industry as well, where, like you said, there's just it's so fly by night. There's just
Yeah.
it blows your mind. It's just like
Yeah. Yeah, and in those days there was a huge distinction between management and labor, which has now vanished, which is actually a passion of mine. You know, we always knew who management was. We laughingly called them, they were in the Black Tower, and this was especially true with Galactica.
Tower.
The Black Tower. So management were the producers and the sponsors and the executives who were responsible for the money part of the show, and then labor was the actors, right? And that all changed when the actors started becoming their own executive producers, and that came when the top of the show actors started demanding so much money, and they were allowed to get away with it, that they had so much money that they didn't need the producers anymore. They're their own executive producers. The biggest executive producer now in Hollywood is Reese Witherspoon. And
wow.
Yeah. And you would think they would be nice to their fellow actors. And you know what the reality is? They're just as greedy as the old executive producers. They pay.
Do that sometimes.
Yep, they pay themselves huge salaries, and then they take their shows and they go film them in states that don't require unions, actors.
Runaway Hollywood.
Parts. Yep. Yeah. It's and they actually shot here in Monterey, the Little White Lies, and I actually went down to the set and tried to ask them why they were using non-union actors, and they wouldn't let me near anybody.
Wow.
Get them out.
Yeah.
There's the door, Jack.
Yeah. And again, the unions now, I'm asked all the time, should I join the Screen Actors Guild? Should I join Equity? And I honestly don't know, because there is so much visibility, and these young actors, as we know, there is so much talent out there. The only thing that protected me back in the old days was that you had to be a member of the union, and you had to be an agent, and you had to get in front of the person who could hire you, and your agent got you in front of that person, and then you started the audition process. Now all these young actors have turned their garages into movie studios, and you can film Gone with the Wind with your iPhone.
Yeah.
Different times, definitely.
Yeah. I like the old version better, but now it is so impersonal, and I think it's a lot harder on the actors these days, because Lorette's daughter, Molly McCook, she has to, if she auditions for something, she goes in the garage and she gets her pages and she reads the script, and it's uploaded to somebody who makes a decision, and she gets no chance to make an adjustment, which is really too bad, because sometimes it's just guesswork, that you do something that the producer really liked. There's any number of ways that you can do a part, and that's why I liked the old method better, where you would go in and I mean the audition process. And I told you, never get an old actor talking. You'll never.
This is fantastic. Don't worry.
You'll never shut up.
Oh, that's great.
But the audition process was always the same. Your first audition was always for the assistant casting director, who was somebody's niece or nephew who'd been in the business for 2 weeks, and usually the producer or somebody or other. And those people were the hardest people to audition for. A, because they didn't know anything, and B, they thought they were powerful people, although they weren't. I can't tell you how many times I would go in and they'd say, "Well, Jack, I don't know you. Tell me what you've done." And on the tip of your tongue is, "You've been in this business for 2 weeks. I've been in this business for 20 years, and you're asking me what I've done?" And that was a no-no. You couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so I knew very well the power of that assistant casting director had one great power. They could keep you from getting in front of the person who could hire you. They had no way of hiring you. All they could do was push you down the line. So I made it my business to be very nice to the assistant casting directors and always treating them with great respect and answering their questions and asking their opinions about how they thought I should do this and all of that. And if you made a friend, that friend might push you to the next level. And the way you get a job is to get in front of the person who has the power to hire you. And then if you're good enough, you get hired. An assistant casting director at the beginning has one power. They have the power to prevent you from getting in front of the person who can hire you. And I know a lot of actors who got big attitudes with assistant casting directors who didn't get a lot of jobs just because they scratched off the list.
Easy to work with, right?
Yeah, you have to play the game. And I was good at the game, and I think my theater training allowed me to be that.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about, Jack. How does this contrast with your experience in the theater as far as auditioning? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's auditioning is auditioning. The big difference between theater and film is all your emotions in theater are outward because you're playing to a large audience, right? So that dramatic scene has to be, I won't say broader, but it has to be much more visible. And then on film with that camera right in your face, all that emotion is, instead of being externalized, is internalized because it's just all in your eyes. And I learned very, very quickly from, and that's how I was taught with the method, that stillness is probably the best thing you can do. And as a director, in my later years, I spent a lot of time, with, younger actors or community theater actors or professional actors going, you don't need a lot of movement here. I said, just, you
don't need to indicate.
Yeah, just stand still and do it. And so I was a great believer in less motion, and connecting with the audience that way. But and I always loved the theater better than I loved film. And I was theater trained, and when I started out in New York, I was lucky enough to fail the physical to go to Vietnam, and my father said, "You want to be an actor? You don't live here anymore."
Wow.
Oh yeah, that was without getting too much into my home life. My father and I never got along. He really disapproved of me being in show business, and so I had,
you did it anyway.
I did it anyway. So I moved into New York City in the fall of 1960, the late fall of 1968. I had gotten a car from my senior year in college. That was my graduation present. And I had done a modeling job for Marshall Fields in Chicago in the spring of my senior year. So I got $1,500 for the car, and I had $500 in a savings account, and I moved into New York with $2,000.
Where were you from originally, Jack?
But I'm originally from New York and Connecticut, and
Okay.
and I was a Eastern kid, at the time, when the world was just transitioning from, post World War II, father knows best, a very much more moral society. And then in my last year of college, the world exploded, and I moved into New York in 1968, the year that changed America forever. We went right from father knows best to hair. Yeah,
And landing on the moon. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary change, something that I had to, learn very quickly because I was just not brought up that way. But you embraced it, And I remember being in New York, and
Well, you were in the arts too, so that had to be an easy fit, right? I mean, you're
well,
creative.
I was lucky. I was lucky enough. I had a roommate from college who was working for J. Walter Thompson, and he let me move it. He had a studio apartment in New York, and he said, "You can come stay with me for a couple of weeks, but you can't stay with me for a long time but at least you can get an apartment." And as it turned out, one of his coworkers at J. Walter Thompson got transferred to the West Coast, and he had an apartment. And the apartment was right on the corner of Brooklyn Heights and Cobble Hill, right? And today, that is the most expensive, most desired place in New York City to live, Brooklyn Heights, right? And in those days, it wasn't. You couldn't get a taxi cab at night to go across the Brooklyn Bridge. You couldn't do it. But and so I couldn't afford to live in New York, but I went out, and I looked at this apartment, and I remember last lady was Mrs. Buchanan, right? And I said, "Can I take over the lease, or I'll sign a new lease?" And this apartment was on Pacific Street, right down by, which is now the fabulous walkway that overlooks the East River and the lower end of Manhattan. I rented the apartment from her. I had the top floor of a brownstone, and I was one block from the walkway. So I had a 2-bedroom apartment, and she was walking.
2 bedrooms.
Oh, I had the whole top floor.
Oh,
it was you walk in the front door, living room, kitchen room, bathroom, dining room, 2 bedrooms. It was a railroad flat. And
so was your commercial work paying for this at this point?
Oh, I didn't have any commercials. I wasn't doing any commercials. I was thespian. I didn't want anything to do with commercials. Pew. No decent actor would do a commercial. Are you kidding me? And so, I mean, my days, the money I had to spend right away out of my $2,000 was, the rent was $150 a month.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so I had to give first and last and deposit. So there went $450. I had to get pictures taken, and there went money. So all of a sudden I was down to, like $1,000. And in those days, what I did get, because I had met who became my first wife, Rennie Durrett, her mother was a children's manager who was now branching out into young actors. As Rennie got older, Rennie was my age, and so she was now taking on actors in their 20s. So when I met her, she agreed to take me on. So I had a manager, but a manager.
You're 22 or so at this point?
Yeah, I'm 22, mm-hmm. And so my day would consist of I get up in the morning and you pounded the pavements. I would go in to the city, and I would make an appointment to go to at least 3 agents' offices, because you could, work through any number of agents. I would go to 3 agents' offices and make sure they had my pictures. Then I would go to 3 casting offices and make sure they had my pictures. Schlepping up and down on buses and subways.
This is why I say that, why people in the industry are the hardest working compared to any conventional job I've ever had.
Oh, yeah.
The hustle and the work that you have to do is you don't just go get, used to be, even back then, people would have jobs for years, decades, and have pensions and stuff like that. But it's like working as an actor or an artist, an actor in the industry, you are out there. You are pounding that pavement, like you said, all the time.
Especially because nobody knew you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was auditioning for theater, and I'd gotten some theater auditions, but I learned very quickly that I wasn't good enough yet. Coming out of Northwestern, I thought I was a good actor, but it was jumping up in class, and I wasn't getting jobs, so. I would go, I'd met a couple of other actor friends that I would go to auditions with, and we sort of formed a little group. And so I would go do my chores. I would go back to Brooklyn Heights. I would take a shower. I would put on my good pair of pants and a sport coat and a nice shirt. I would get back on the subway. and go into New York. And New York at this time was in its worst condition. It was horrible.
Grungy New York.
Yes, it was. This was right after the Supreme Court had declared that pornography and X-rated films were an expression of art and not illegal. So the whole Times Square Broadway district, it transformed itself into just one porn theater after another.
This is Taxi Driver New York.
Yes, it really was. But it was wildly exciting for somebody young. It was just, the energy was tremendous. But I wanted to see the shows on Broadway, and I couldn't afford to go see a Broadway show. So I would go back into the city and I'd wait for intermission, and then I'd go in with the crowd at intermission. And because somebody always left. Sure. And the ushers were usually out of work actors, and you got to know them, or you got to know their faces. And if you were nicely dressed and stuff, they didn't bother you. Sure. So I would stand in the back and wait till the house lights started to come down. I'd see an empty seat and I'd scoot down and I'd see the second act of shows. And there are still shows today that I've never seen the first act of. I've never seen.
So Jack, what was Jack, 22-year-old Jack, as he's sitting in this theater having snuck in? What are the dreams swirling around in your head at this point?
Oh, all I wanted to do was be up on that stage, and that goes back to my early childhood, with my father being, again, a huge advertising executive. Right out of Mad Men. He was a cross between Roger Serling and Don Draper. Cool. When I watched that show, it was like watching my household growing up, right down to the set decorations. Mm-hmm. So I would, I would go in and sit down. I've never seen the first act of Company. But I remember one day an agent called me up and said, "Hey, I got an audition for you. It's for a commercial. It's over at Ted Bates Advertising." And I went, "Commercial? I don't do commercials. I'm a thespian. I'm an actor. I don't do commercials." And he says, "Well, if you don't want to go, I'll get somebody else to go." And I sort of snottily said, I'll go. And so I went and I read the dialogue, and the next day they called me up and said, "Well, you got the job." And I said, "Oh yeah, big deal. Okay." So I go in, and to this day I remember the commercial. It was a group of fraternity guys sitting around the fraternity house, and I was the one on the phone, and I had the dialogue. And so I remember my lines were, this group of us were standing around. My lines are, I said, "Well, that's great. I'll pick you up at 8. And I hung up the phone and I turned to my friends and I said, "See, I told you I could get a date, and you can too if you use Clearasil."
I remember that commercial.
Oh, wow.
That was my first paying job. I remember the session fee at that point was $150. And so that $150 was possible because I was literally down to my last $50.
I got to pay for that.
I did not know how I was going to pay my rent. And the only thing I knew was I wasn't going home. I would have lived in the gutter. I would not give my father the satisfaction of telling me, "I told you I was right. You should have taken business courses so you could make a living." I wasn't going home. So I did the commercial. I'm down to my last can of SpaghettiOs, and
oh wow.
I go to the mailbox one day and there's an envelope in there, and I look at it and it goes, "Talent and Residuals." What's talent and residuals? So I opened up the envelope, and there across the top was Procter & Gamble, Clearasil, Class A uses 1 to 24, primetime television. And the gross on the check was $1,500. The net on the check was $1,200. And I went, "Holy shit. They pay you every time this goes on the air?" And
commercials aren't so bad now.
I was saved. I called every agent I knew. I go, "Any commercial you want to send me on, I'll go on." And I could say one of the reasons I was able to maintain.
And that was a national commercial too.
Oh yeah, a career as an actor was over the years. I did over 200 commercials, And the bulk of my income came from commercials. Yeah. But clear.
Advertising pays. That's when I've done some work for advertising. I'll tell you, man, the money in that industry is ridiculous.
Oh yeah. But that's what it did. And again, the commercial industry was in New York at that time.
Madman.
The New York was daytime television and commercials, and the West Coast was primetime television. And of course, we all wanted to be, on primetime television.
So, Jack, did your dad ever see this commercial? I mean, he's in advertising, right? And all of a sudden
he did. My father and I had a really, really bad relationship, and I was abused as a child. I was beaten. And so, I mean, all the years, all the performances I did on All My Children, he never said one thing of, praise to me about it. But
typical withholding male back in the day, right?
Yeah. But, when you asked me how I knew I wanted to be in the theater, my father, as a big addict, he would get tickets to opening nights, to everything. And I remember he came down with the flu on one night that he got tickets to opening night. My mother said, well, I just won't go. And I said, well, I'll go. I think I was 8.5. And I said, can I go? And she said, all right, I'll take you with me. So we went to the theater, and I sat in the 7th row on opening night of My Fair Lady.
Ah, what a great first show.
Yeah, 1956. And I knew right then and there that
you got bit, huh? The bug bit.
That's where I wanted to be. And I was always much happier on the stage than I was on the film set. Because on the film set, you get it right once and it's gone forever. On the stage, you get to recreate it, every night, to a new audience every night. And Richard and I used to laugh about that, and he was always agreed. Richard always told me, he said, I'm a better actor than you were, but I'll admit you're a better entertainer than I am.
There's a difference.
Yeah. But and then I once I knew I wasn't going to starve to death, I actually went and got a job with an agent for $5 an hour. I remember organizing his actors to go out and audition for summer stock. So I would take them out to their auditions and stuff, and I always auditioned, even though I may not have been right for anything. I would audition, so I practiced my material. And I remember, the year I did that, I got one person a job. And that was me. I got me a job. and
that the inside, work that job from the inside.
It was in the summer of '69, and they wanted to do a summer season down in Florida, in Miami, in the Coconut Grove. And it was a disaster from the beginning because nobody's ever there. But it was a 4-season show, and in the cast they had a headliner for the starring role, and then they had a bunch of unknown actors from New York coming down to do a lot of the other parts. And I remember 4 of the actors were myself, Danny DeVito, Catherine Damon, and Paul Michael Glaser.
Holy cow!
Yeah, we were all
the young ones, up and coming young ones, right?
Yeah, and the show, the shows were so bad. We only did half of the schedule. We were doing room service, and I remember we kept running off the stage if we weren't on it, because we had a little TV backstage. And this was in July of '69, and we would, in between scenes, we watched Alan Armstrong set foot on the moon.
Nice.
So that's where I knew it was. And
July 20th, '69.
Yeah, and they canceled the second half of the run, which allowed me to go back to New York, which was a blessing because I arrived back to New York just at the moment they started the auditions for All My Children, which is another huge story. This was probably one of the greatest chances that any network ever took. ABC realized that the soap operas that have been going on forever, which were for moms at home ironing clothes, and really nothing to do plot wise, but just sort of little titillating things. ABC saw what was happening. The country was in turmoil now. I mean, there were riots in the streets, there were riots in the ghettos, there were riots on college campuses, the anti-Vietnam War protests, civil rights. Bobby Kennedy had been shot, Martin Luther King had been shot. America, America was this. I never saw America's hostility as much then until the last few years here. It's like we've gone back to 1968, and I will not discuss modern politics because it's too hard. People have their own opinions, but the hostility.
I hear what you're saying, though. It's that temperature is.
Yeah, yep. It really is. But I came back to New York in time to just in time to start auditioning for all my children, and as it turned out, I found out later. I was hired after the first audition.
You were with Richard as well, right?
Yes. So
was he already on the show, or you guys?
No. Together? The show hadn't even started yet. ABC decided at that point they were going to take a huge chance and make the show about topical subjects. They wanted to make it about Vietnam, about youth rebellion, about civil rights, about this new generation of young people coming up, which was nothing like our parents. And it was a tremendous risk. And they also, to do that, had to make 4 young people who had no experience doing daytime television, right, the stars of the show. And, I remember going through 5 auditions. I did not know that I was hired after the first one. I found that out much later. But I remember that each audition we got worse instead of better, because the closer you get to a job, the more nervous you become.
Oh, sure.
And I remember Richard was there, Karen Gorney, and a young actress named Susan Lucci. And so we go through all the auditions. I remember when we put the scenes on tape, I actually saw those tapes, and God, we were bad. We were so awful. But ABC did a really, really smart thing, and it's something that I have remembered my whole life, and I'm extremely, extremely grateful for. ABC decided if they were going to do this, they would surround us with the creme de la creme of daytime. And I'm talking people like Ruth Warwick from Citizen Kane, Mary Fickett, Ray McDonald, Amy Prince, who was the queen of daytime, Fra Heflin, who was Van Heflin's sister. All these people had huge histories in daytime. And they were now told to play secondary roles to 4 kids who didn't know shit. And they could have made our lives miserable, but they took us under their wing. They nurtured us, they taught us, they bailed us out of so many mistakes that we ever made, and we became a cast of really, really close-knit people. And the show would not have succeeded without them protecting us, and that's never been brought out enough as far as I'm concerned. Cool. Because we did the whole first year live. Now,
how was that? Okay, like that, you had to learn new lines every day.
Yeah, we went from 20-page scripts to 40-page scripts, and so you literally with no rehearsal. So thank God for my theater training. I mean, I could learn scripts really quickly. I could learn blocking really quickly. The one that took longer was Richard, because Richard was from the West Coast, and Richard always had a very adversarial relationship with the producers, because Richard, you've met Richard, we always wore the ratty T-shirts and the leather jacket and everything. Richard was a California kid, and I was a prep school Northwestern kid from New York, from society and boarding school and all that stuff. But Richard and I got along really, really well, because after 2 shows, I had to make a decision. and we all started on the same day, and it became very, very apparent who the heartthrob was going to be on this show, and that was going to be Richard. And I had two choices. I could fight this and try to fight for my own place at the top of this thing and try to knock him off, or I could go, I can see this now, I'm going to be the best friend, right? So I made that decision really early on, and because of that, Richard and I became very close friends because I was no threat to him. So I always laughed and said, Richard got all the girls and I got all the mothers. And and Richard did. I mean, we would come out of the studio and there'd be these hordes of young girls going, "Oh, Richard, we love you, we love you, we love you." You know, and Richard would go wade through these girls like a great white shark through seals, and you know, he would end up with a different girl every night, and the mothers would come up to me and go, "Oh, Jack, you're such a nice boy. You're just the kind of boy we would like our daughter to marry." I didn't want to marry their daughters. I wanted to do to their daughters what Richard was doing to their daughters. But
friend zoned.
Yeah, but those I can honestly say were that, and throughout my whole career, those were the happiest times of my life. New York was so vital, and you had a job that was 52 weeks a year, and you know, it's as long as you didn't screw it up. They had the option to fire you every 13 weeks.
Like a consistent gig, right?
Yep, a consistent gig, and we were paid peanuts to start with. But peanuts,
we were paid.
we were paid. I remember we all started out at $200 a show, and I had a 2.5 show a week guarantee. So I was guaranteed $500 a week, you know, or $25,000 a year in 1970, which wasn't bad.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to you know, to survive in New York. And believe me, I loved it. And one of my greatest regrets is that I ever left that show. But that's a whole other story, which now you guys may have questions that you want to ask me about Galactica or other things.
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would love to ask a couple of questions of Galactica. Before we do that, we'll go ahead and we'll just throw a quick Galactica video up since we can do that and get away with it now. So, hang on. We'll go ahead and...
My favorite scene when you guys in Living Legend is when you guys are... It looks like you're almost going to throw down like in West Side Story.
It's just so unbelievable seeing all you guys again. How do you think we feel? We sailed more than 2 yards ago to save Molokai and the satellite. Since then, we haven't seen a human soul.
And the rest of the Fifth Fleet was destroyed. And if Kane hadn't pulled the most brilliant decoy I have ever seen, we'd be gone too.
But you must have headed away from the colonies to be this far out.
That was another one of Kane's touches. Now, he knew that they'd be lined up all the way from Molokai to the colonies waiting for us. So he turned us out to deep space, and we kept on going. We've been fighting ever since.
Fighting? You mean running?
You forget who our skipper is. I mean, he doesn't know the meaning of the word run. We're on strikes round the clock.
Can we be of some help, Apollo?
Not unless you want to assist in the transfer of fuel.
What transfer's that?
You have a job to do. Stand aside. What do you think you're doing?
Fighting for our commander and our lives.
Your commander has accepted the order. Now, why don't you show the same good sense?
Look, Captain, maybe you don't understand the situation. Adama humiliated the greatest man that ever lived. A man that can think and fight circles around your father.
She's right, Apollo. He saved every one of us from certain death. Now it's our turn to help him.
Don't you understand? Commander Adama had no choice. For better or worse, there can only be one leader.
That's right. And we've got the wrong one.
If the Jets in this Sharks scene, I'm thinking.
Yeah, and that was, now this gets into how I ended up on Galactica. I'm sure that you know the whole history of Battlestar. Am I right on?
Well, I mean, we may, but our fans that are listening may not. So.
Well, I'll kind of tell you the whole thing. You know, in the 70s and stuff, sci-fi was not anything on television. It was after Star Trek, which was not successful as a TV show. It really wasn't. It wasn't until they started making the movies that it became wildly successful. DeForest Kelley lived 4 doors up from me on Woodcliff Road in Sherman Oaks, and he and I were good friends.
Dr. Koenig lives a couple blocks away from me.
Yeah, it's and I saw Walter a lot at conventions and stuff. But D. Kelly, I mean, he was just the nicest man, and he always used to laugh and said, thank God for those movies. He said, all of a sudden, I became rich. But Battlestar, nobody wanted sci-fi, and then, a young producer, director, came along by the name of George Lucas and made this sci-fi film called Star Wars. And I remember nobody knew about this. It was done on the quiet. Nobody knew, but I remember getting invited to the not a grand opening, but a screening at the old Chinese theater before they broke it up. This huge theater which seated 1,500 people, all actors, and stuff in there. And of course, everybody's going to hate it because actors are have to watch a movie that they're not in. They're going to hate it. And I remember the lights went down and those first chords of John Williams music came on, and I jumped out of my seat and I said, I got to have popcorn for this. And I went back and got popcorn. We sat through it, we watched it, and the entire place went up for grabs. I mean, it was everybody up and screaming. And of course, Star Wars went on to reinvent, space science fiction into the mainstream media. So Galactica came into being because Glenn, saw an opportunity to do this, and he made Battlestar Galactica into a 3-hour movie of the week, which I had absolutely nothing to do with. But it was fraught with peril to start with. Richard was wanted by ABC as the big star because Richard had done Streets and the Jan and Dean Story and a bunch of other things. He was pretty big at ABC, but Glenn wanted Dirk to be the big star. So you had 2 alpha males there that were, going back to, remember, you can only have one alpha male and somebody has to be the best friend. You had 2 alpha males there, fighting over who was going to be the star of Battlestar. Now, Battlestar got made into a 3-hour movie of the week. It was incredibly expensive to do. They built huge sets, very complicated sets. They did, at the time, the top of the line special effects. I mean, there was no such thing as CGI back when that was made, but they did the special effects, and it was only supposed to be a movie of the week. That's all it was, and they ran it, and it got the highest ratings since Brian's Song, which was the very first movie of the week. And then, as we tend to do in America, instead of going, well, this is good, maybe we ought to look ahead and see if we can make this a series, but let's do a lot of pre-production, a lot of preparation, so when we do it, it's good. They didn't do that. They rushed it into being a series right away, which was one of the reasons why it had so much trouble. They had no scripts. They had no special effects except for the special effects that they used in the pilot, which is why all the Viper scenes flying in space look pretty much the same. The only difference is they fly from left to right in one sequence, and then they just reverse the film. They fly them from right to left and the rest of it. But if you look at all the explosions and the Cylon ships blowing up, it's all the same. I mean, that's all they had. So when they rushed it into the show, they did not have a lot of scripts, and they didn't have an idea of where the show was going to go. Glenn had very specific ideas for the show because, with the Egyptian motif, and there was a lot of Mormon theology because Glenn was a Mormon, a lot of Mormon theology in that show. But the show did not have, a long range plan as for what it was going to be. And so you had good shows, then you had bad shows. Then you had a good show and a bad show. And ABC didn't know where to put it. They put it on Sunday night. They put it on Thursday night. It just ran into problems. And it was also the most expensive show to film in the history of television because of the sets. The sets were not made for weekly usage. They were made for one time in a movie. So you had, just the control room, and the corners were like square corners. Corridors were not rounded so you could get cameras around them. This was long before Steadicams. You didn't have handheld cameras. You had the big Panaflex cameras that you had to put on rails. So you literally had to do the show in bits and pieces. And of course, it just took forever. The show wasn't into its third episode until it was hopelessly over budget, which brought tremendous flack down from the Black Tower and stuff.
Encounters.
Yeah. So, the show was always, and yet the show was never out of the top 15. It was always in the top 15. So despite everything that was going wrong, it was surviving. But the tensions on the set, I knew Richard, I would talk to Richard, the tensions on the set were very, very high. It was, Maron was not happy on it. Jane Seymour did not want to do it as a series. So, Lorette's part, which was never supposed to be in it as a series, they changed her from, remember in the movie, she was a solicitor. And then they made her a med tech. But, as it moved through and got towards the 3/4 mark of what was going on, the show was in deep trouble. And because it was the same thing every week. You were running away from the Cylons. You fought with the Cylons. Baltar sat up on his perch and preached. And it was kind of the same thing every week. So Glenn decided that instead of just this one conflict, could he bring in something that would provide conflict within the fleet itself? And that's when they brought the Pegasus in the living legend. So now you bring in this, he wrote this script, and the Pegasus is the warship. They're the one that goes out and fights everybody. But you needed, which I laughingly called to the super duper hyper viper fighter pilots, who were who were the top two pilots and the two most aggressive pilots on the Pegasus. And that was Anne Lockhart was hired immediately because they wanted a girl with something more to do. And then they needed somebody for the guy. And this was another alpha male. And this was something just fraught with peril. And it was really funny because I had worked for Glenn a couple of times. Glenn knew of my relationship with Richard on All My Children. And it was the only, I think, one of maybe two shows in my entire career that I did not have to audition for. I got a phone call to go to Glenn's house. So I went to Glenn's mansion, and he sat me down and he said, look, this is what it is. And you are going to be an alpha male. And he said, I am scared to death to do this. He said, because the last thing I need is tension on the set. And he said, you are going to be in direct conflict with Richard. And I need to know this is not going to spill off from in front of the camera to, when the cameras were shut down. And I said, Richard and I worked very well together. There will be absolutely no problem doing this, because when the camera turns off, Richard can still get all the girls outside of Studio 28, and I'll just get in my car and go home. And Glenn said, that's what I need. He said, I have your promise that there will be no internal hijinks. And I said, Glenn, I work with Richard all the time, and it's not a problem. And that's how I got the job. And the thing that was so amazing about it was in the original script, which was a 2-episode show, Bojay is killed in the raid on Gamorre. And and so I knew I was going to do 2 episodes, and that was going to be the end of it. And I must admit, when I arrived on the set, the tension was just palpable. I mean, it was just awful. Yeah, I mean, the director was Ben Casey. What was his name? Played Ben Casey. Just he was just a bad director and did not know how to relate to actors and stuff. And all of the actors, we literally were like soldiers in the trench, huddling together, just trying to do our job in one take or less, because the crew loved it. They were on golden time, but we were shooting 12 and 14-hour days, and the show, since it took so long to get every show going, the lead time from when you finished shooting it to when it went on the air kept shrinking. And by the time we got into the Living Legends, I think it was down to 2 weeks. Yeah, it was really tough. But I mean, the actors, we all stuck together. I mean, that was again a blessing. Dirk and I became good friends just because in the script we were good friends, and I had no relationship with Dirk, and we just became friends. And Richard and I maintained this camaraderie that I said, even though you and I are antagonists on this show, you're the star of this show, and you and I did a lot of shows on All My Children with this dynamic. So I want to keep this offstage dynamic the way it always was. So Richard and I never had a problem. So we finished. We shot the first episode, and then we're on the set one day, and the AD came to me and said, "Jack, Glenn wants to see you up in his office." And I went, "Oh shit! I'm
silent noise."
Yeah, I'm fine. What did I do wrong? I don't know what I did wrong. And then so I go up to Glenn's office, and he comes in and he said, "Sit down." And so I sat down, and he went, "What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do with you?" And I said, "What did I do wrong?" He said, "Nothing. That's the problem." And he said, "Jack, you are so," and this is a really nice compliment. He said, "Jack, you are so good in this." He said, "The dynamic you bring to this is exactly what I wanted." And he said, "There's absolutely no question is that I've got to keep this character on the show." But he said, "I don't know how to do that." He said, "Because if I bring in another alpha male, I'm going to have outright mutiny amongst the women who weren't getting enough to do." And he said, I just don't know what to do. He said, "Except I promise you, I won't kill you off in the second half of this. Will only wound you." And he said, then he said, "I got to find a way to get you into the last 3 shows of the season." And I said, "Glenn," I said, bless your heart, I would love to do this, but I can tell you right now that I'm not available to do the last 3 episodes of the season." This was a time of my career that it just so funny. I was in the midst of a divorce, and it was funny, just a silver lining. I was just working all the time. I was already scheduled to do a 2-hour How the West Was Won, which is the origin of the famous horse story, which we will do in another episode of this. And behind that, I was booked to do a half-hour sitcom. I said, "Glenn, I'm not available for the next, 5 weeks." And Glenn said, "Thank God." He said, then what I can do is, he said, I'll put you in one scene in each of the last 3 episodes. And and so in the funny thing was in the War of the Gods, which is the last two shows that Patrick McNee was the guest star on. If you remember that in the very beginning, Bojay's out flying and he gets attacked and disappears into the cloud of light.
Right.
Cloud of light on page 11, and I kept going through pages going, when do they find Bojay? right and so it as originally written at the end of that thing, they rescue Bojay. There's a couple of scenes where Bojay comes back, all right, and we see Bojay at the end. That never got filmed because I could never get a day off from shooting How the West Was Won, where I could go over to Universal and film that. So they actually cut that out. So I was actually never found in the end of it. But Glenn promised me, when all this came up to me and I saw him, he said, Jack, he said, we will be making changes in the show. I think they would have gotten rid of Jolly and Mr. Green Jeans and all of that. And he said, we'll make you a permanent part of the cast. We'll give you a contract. And so you'll be, one of the stars of the show and when we go to the second year. And I said, that's great, except we never got to the second year.
Yeah.
We never, because the network canceled the show, and mostly because of the expense. And they replaced it with Mork and Mindy.
Oh.
Yep.
Space show.
Yeah. So that's I mean, I had a great time doing it. I loved it. We thought it was going to keep going, but it didn't. And then I was off doing How the West Was Won, and like I say, that's a story for another time. Yeah, I mean, it was, we were sorry, but again, unlucky. It just, when people ask me how do you survive in the business? How do you maintain a career in the business? And I go, that's simple. You have to have that gene in you, that gene that says, hey world, look at me, just look at me. And it's not really a good gene to have because it's a narcissistic gene, but it was always, in me. I always wanted to be out in front, which is why I love the theater the most, because I always had the feedback. I had the audience in front of me. The second thing that is that you have to be able to get yourself in a position in front of people who can hire you. And I said, if you put those two things together, that's maybe 10% of what you need to thrive in this business. And the other 90% is blind fracking luck. You got to be lucky. You have to be lucky. Oh, wow. And I was not a lucky actor. I had opportunities. I mean, if you go on IMDb, and you just scroll through my filmography, you'll see like 60 some odd entries there of shows that I did.
Better than digging ditches, Jack.
Yep. And you just, I love being in the business. I had very, very few bad experiences working with actors who were assholes. And it wasn't only really until the very, very end. I remember doing Melrose Place and was just amazed at how unprepared these young kids were. But, I worked with people like Jimmy Arness and Jack Lord. And, that's another story of Jack Lord loving me. And I did, 2 5-0s.
For a while.
Yeah, it was, but again, all good things come to an end. I came along, sort of, I guess, in the middle of, what I call the star-driven shows, and that Quinn Martin was an early producer who used me a lot. And he killed me in every show. He did. He did. I never got past page 14. And
the other actor that always does, Sean, what was his name? The guy from
oh yeah, it was. But I mean, when you had star-driven shows, the star had a different adventure every week, and so there was a lot of work for guest stars. So there was a lot of work for, other actors. Which is why
I think of the Love Boat with the different actors that would come onto that.
Yeah. I never did a Love Boat, but it all changed. It all changed in the 80s. It went from what we call the studio-driven shows. I mean, when you would go audition for the casting people at Universal or Columbia or Warner Brothers or MGM. So you got to know all these casting people. And then it changed into the producer-driven shows. And that started out with Botchko and went through Kelly and Aaron Spelling and all of that. And then it went from star-driven shows to ensemble nighttime soap operas, literally. I mean, with huge resident casts. When you think of the cast of, ER and Knots Landing, Dynasty, Ally McBeal. So there was much less work for guest stars, and as I got older, I found myself doing less work. My most productive years were from the end of 75 through 82. Those were my most productive years. And then, it started to slide, which scared me, even more. There's so many salaries. There was the pilot that I turned down in 1985, which is such I don't know, how much time have you guys got? Do you want to hear these stories?
I think we're going to have you back there, Jack. This is fantastic. I really think and we had talked about this before, making you kind of a, and once again, if it's up, I don't want to spring it on you, but making you like a monthly type.
Absolutely. I'm sitting here with an amputated leg. I only have one leg. I sit in my house most of the time because my knee was amputated above the knee. So I can't walk really. I have a prosthesis, but I have to be on a walker all the time. So, if I go anywhere, I have to have a companion with me. And it's just, so I spend a lot of time alone in the house. So I'm available, and I've had more fun in this last hour with you guys than I've had.
We enjoy your tales there, Jack. No doubt about it. I'm always interested in talking with somebody in the industry. The industry is a fascinating place, as you know, and I'm in behind the scenes in visual effects, but I have lots of friends that are actors, and like I said, I've always admired anybody that can make a living, craft a living out of being an actor in Hollywood. It's amazing.
It's not easy. You have to be honest with yourself, and I was always honest with myself. I knew my shortcomings. I knew what I wanted more than anything, and it was, if you want to do this, then you have to figure out what you want out of life. And if you want a family, and you want kids, and you want to make sure your kids go to a good school, and you want a job that allows you advancement, and you get a stock portfolio, and you leave a legacy,
and
then show business is but
it's a different breed. There's no doubt about it.
And I although I wanted all those things, I wanted this more, and I was selfish about it. My mind was made up about it. And, looking back on it, would I have changed anything? Yeah, I would probably have never left all my children. But you didn't know that at the time, because, at the time, if you wanted to go to the top of the industry, which was prime time, you had to be on the West Coast. And all my children asked me to come back 4 times, and all 4 times I'd done pilots, and I was unavailable. And then when I called Agnes Nixon in 1986, she said, "Jack, I asked you 4 times. I'm not interested anymore." And
wow.
You know that rigor,
Ouch.
the whole stress of like trying to dovetail gigs is,
Yeah.
it's crazy, you're like, ah,
Yeah. You just you don't know.
yeah, exactly. So
And
invariably you're going to have to turn something down. So that's just if you're lucky, that is.
yeah, yeah. And I that was the only show I ever turned down was Chips, and I did, getting the bottle of wine every year was fun. Never signed, just said thanks again, Jack. And at Christmas time, I would get it. But I mean, when I married my second wife, my divorce was, it was a product of the ups and downs. And I think my first wife, if you look up Rennie's career, she was the one that they wanted on the West Coast, and so I was dragged along, and I know I took out my frustrations on her. Looking back on it, so even though she ran off with the director, there was partly my life to blame. But interestingly enough, as much as I loved acting, when Rennie left me for this director, who she married and is still married to, he's much older than she. He's turning 96. Rennie's my age. She's turning 80. When she got the stability, and Bruce Bilson, if you look him up, he's a very well-known episodic television director. She had the stability that she needed, and she never acted again.
So we're getting back on. This is not a stable industry. Like I said, you got to be a certain breed to be able to navigate these waters.
Yeah. And she didn't. And she'd started as a kid, and as a child actress, and her family used her money to put her sisters through college and everything. And I think Rennie, she just didn't want the hassle anymore. She found a greater calling in life. She worked for CASA for the second half of her life, helping underprivileged kids of broken marriages and stuff get through court systems, and was very successful at it. So, and she and I, even though we got divorced, we, after a very short period of hostility, became friends, and we're still friends. And just to show you how bad actors are, I worked for Bruce many times after he stole my wife. So it goes to show you what a whore I was. if the job was there, I took it. And they've been.
You can't be a working actor if you're not working.
Yeah. So she found the person I liked. When I got married the second time, the only thing I asked my wife is, I said, "You can never ask me if things get bad to give up my career. That's the one no question." And I've been married to Katie for 43 years, and
Wow.
she's never brought it up. Yep, and she's put up with my ups and the downs. She is much more responsible for the success and the longevity of our marriage than I am. And we have two great kids, who are out in the business world doing well, and so things worked out. My only regret, and it'll be my thing, is I never wanted to grow old. I'm Peter
Who
Pan.
does?
Yeah,
nobody does.
and coming up on 80, I wish I could go back and just if get in the time machine and go back to. I would go back to day one of all my children and just do it all over again, because I loved it that much. And
You have to live it.
well, I did. And as when I went back to theater, in the 90s,
Like I said, I know a lot of people that, coming up pre-industry that worked in cubicles and retail and hated their jobs, and maybe even people that became successful monetarily, very much so, but are not happy inside with what they're doing.
It's why I became a director, as a theater director. And although I directed a lot of professional theater, but I directed a lot of community theater, and I knew these people who worked in these jobs that this was in their blood somewhere, and they would come audition. I would put them in shows, and at the first thing I would tell them at the beginning of rehearsals is, you're here and you're going to get to have the fun of your life. That you will never hear the word no come out of my mouth. I will never denigrate you. There's no idea that you can bring up that is bad. I want you to be creative. I want you to think of things. I want you to try everything. I said,
now, Jack, do you think a lot of that attitude comes from the way you were fostered on All My Children originally?
Yep, absolutely. And I wanted them to know they were in a safe place. Now, in reality, I had the show all blocked out and knew exactly what I was going to get out of it. But it was for me. I wanted them to feel that they were safe. And I always laughed and I said, look, when you're sitting in your office and you've had a horrible day, and I said, when the 5 o'clock whistle goes off, you get to come to rehearsal and have fun, and your boss will still be an asshole. And
there you go.
And I would look at the shows that I put up, and I was very proud of a lot of them, because these actors who never got a chance to do it got a chance because the positive influence that I put around them, saying you can't do this wrong. You just can't do it wrong. It's going to be right. It'll be great to watch their confidence grow, and then to watch their faces when there was an audience.
Beautiful thing.
I'd sit in the back of the theater and cry, even though it was a comedy. I'd sit in the back of the theater and cry, and just go, I'm so glad, you got to do this. And
so in some ways, Jack, that's even has, I don't know, for me personally, when I can inspire somebody or foster or encourage somebody in that way, that is gold in life. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that is where the rubber hits the road, as far as like what matters is, and I'm in the entertainment industry, you're in the entertainment industry. My wife works with disenfranchised kids and literally changes their lives, lowers socioeconomic, and pulls these kids up out of these horrible situations. I go, you're my hero. The way you changed this work, and that's what what I feel reminds me of what you're doing with these actors in community theater.
Yep.
You're fostering this love, this that people, this sort of connection with their dream.
Pay it forward.
If you're not going for it in this big professional sense, but the stage is a stage, right? And when you're in front of somebody and you're acting, you're doing something that's coming from your heart. The fact that you get to do that, and you have somebody like yourself that's telling you that you can't do it wrong, because let's face it, everybody thinks that they're going to do it wrong, right?
Of course they are, because they're denigrated all their life. They're in a job that they hate. Right. Their boss yells at them because they've got the spreadsheet wrong or something. And I go, this is your safe place. You can't do this wrong.
That's awesome.
This is and I said, don't tell anybody to wait until the second week when the show gets better. I said, this show is going to be as good on opening night as it is on closing night. That's my promise to you. You will be ready on opening night, and you believe that, and you believe in yourselves, and you believe in me, to guide you.
Those are words people don't hear enough, and that's
Well, I always was a believer in pay it forward, and I had in my early career the people who paid it forward to Richard and me and Susan, and and now they're all gone. Most, all these people. There's only 2 people left from the original cast of All My Children, and that's Susan and me. And Richard died. Everybody else is gone, and but they're still alive in my memory.
That and their legacies. Like, you've passed on your legacy, your training as a director. You've inspired other people. It is something that has been passed beyond you. So that's the fantastic gift that all of us as humans can do. All of us as people can do.
And we need to do
that.
more. Yeah, we need to do more of it. We're in a bad place in this country right now, and we'll get out of it. Nothing is forever.
We got out of the 60s.
But I mean, again, I just. Like I say, as 22 and 23, not knowing where my next meal was coming from, were some of the most exciting days of my life. The adventure was out there.
Remember that pit in your stomach? Holy moly, that's...
Yeah, and all I knew is I wasn't going home.
Yeah.
I wasn't. And so I'll let you guys go for now.
We're going to have you back, definitely, Jack. We really appreciate this, and I think it's important. I think it's important that we recognize that. I mean, you are a fantastic individual that is shared all of your. Go ahead.
Write yourself a note, because again, I love to tell the story. So you have to hear the horse story, and you have to hear the David Jansen stories, which are classics.
I think you're a fan of Jaws too, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I knew some of the people from Jaws, and and
let's put a pin in that, though. We could talk about that all day.
We got all sorts of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, so. Well, I mean, we were, just think how lucky, Spielberg was, in the brilliance of Spielberg to make that movie the way he did, with a shark that didn't work, and he was at Universal because Fred Wasserman, who was the head of Universal,
Wasserman Tower,
and gave him, but he was. They gave Rocky to. I remember the line because I heard the line. The producers who hated Spielberg because Wasserman was his champion, so they gave the money to Stallone to do Rocky. And the line was, give the obnoxious little Jewish kid the big thing about the shark and watch him fall on his ass. And yeah.
You know what's funny real quick about that movie? That movie, once they go out to sea, is timeless. You could run that movie in any decade, and it doesn't, it's not dated at all. But when you get back to Amity, it is. But out at sea, it's timeless.
Yeah, and every actor in that thing was on somebody's shit list. And
wow.
Yeah,
definitely got to hear about that one then.
Yep. I mean, Roy Scheider was not liked, and but then again, I mean, I through a lot of them. Again, another story. Write down, my Larry Hagman story, with Dennis Weaver, and so
we have to have you perform too, because
right, yeah, and then of course I sent you the clips of, and that was always the most fun of me. Going to conventions, and for the fans, if they the only reason the new Battlestar ever came on was because of Richard, and he made The Second Coming. We did it all illegally on the slide. I was the only actor from the original show who would do it with him because I was his friend, and
that was the ultimate fan film. For Battlestar Galactica.
Yep, and then instead of doing what the fans wanted, they handed it to Ron Moore, and he did. He just remade the original differently. Yep. I never liked it, but I will give him credit where credit's due. He saved the Sci-Fi Channel. He got good people in the show. He had good effects, and the show came along at the right time. It was 2 generations past the original. You had a whole new audience out there.
Yep.
So, and then he went on to make Outlander, which is not a bad show either. And so, my hat's off to Ron Moore. The only thing was he promised he would give me an episode or 2 in the new one, and he didn't. The only one he put in it.
How dare he?
Yeah, the only one he put in it was Richard, and I think he had to, because Richard was the driving force. I mean, for 3 years we went around the country with that trailer. And that's how the cabaret came into existence, because I would stand and Richard do all the talking. I felt like I was back at All My Children again as the best friend. So I started entertaining the audience at night, going back to my musical career, and I was amazed that that Sarah Rush became my producer, and on Saturday night, I would do an hour and 20 minutes of stories and songs, and it was a big hit. Who knew? They all came dressed up. When we started those conventions, you came and people just came for autographs, and then there was costume parties, and then they became more elaborate. Then it turned into cosplay and fencing and acrobatics, and now these fans make their own movies.
Yes.
I mean, and they're good.
Can't wait to show you ours.
Yeah. Well, we shall do that. And I know I've talked your ear off, so I will get off. But Chris, you know where I am.
Definitely. We will. This is going to be a monthly thing if you're okay with it. And I think the fans actually, I looked through a couple of things as well as the fans like a monthly Jack thing. Heck yeah. Sign us up. So
I'm available. So let me know next month when you want me on. And, I think I figured out how to work the iPad.
Yeah, I think we got it figured out. Thank you so much, Jack. You're so important to us as an actor and as a mentor in some cases, and as a fellow fan. You are very important to us. So thank you so much.
And my thanks to you for having me on. And as you and I both know, the only reason any of us were ever successful was because of the fans. Because if the fans didn't turn it on, we would not have.
Where we're at.
We would never be remembered. So to anybody who was watching this, to my fans, you were always the reason why I was able to succeed, and I will never forget you, and I will always thank you.
So here's to you, fans, feel the fleet.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye for now.
Pleasure, Jack.
Love you too.
Wow.
What a nice gentleman.
He's a fantastic person, and we can definitely talk for a while. And I love the stories. He's got some great stories. I mean, we only got a couple tonight because I've listened to a bunch of them on the phone, and you learn from the stories are entertaining, but you can pull something away from them. I think you were hitting right on the head with the struggle it is to become an actor at that point in time. And the struggle it is to you're farming yourself out at this point. You're it's hit and miss when you get gigs. It's not something that's standard.
Hollywood is all freelancers, so it's just like everything. Every production eventually ends, right? You're lucky if you get something that ran 7 years, like a Star Trek or something, or 10 years, Walking Dead. That's a complete fluke. But but otherwise, if you're on features too, that's 2 to 4 years. Then you got to find another job. Yeah. And luckily, like I said, you got something lined up. But sometimes, like you said, Jack is talking about, having to turn down other work for other things. So it's like this weird
and it's a gamble. Yeah. And sometimes you lose and sometimes you win.
Yeah, it's just.
I can't wait till he comes on and talks about his other commercials that how he I think it was Orange.
I remember that Clear Cell commercial too.
The Clear Cell. I was looking for it while we were talking. I couldn't find it. But I did find at one point in time, I can't find it right now. He'll talk about the Shure commercial where he's a golfer.
Okay.
And how much he was blown away with how much money he's made on that constantly. I mean, it played for so long. And he's like, I can't believe
commercial gigs.
I can't believe that I made that much money on that commercial. So.
Wow. Yeah.
And
well, he's got 250 of them under his belt. He was all over the commercial landscape.
Yep.
So that's like I said, national commercials.
Yeah, and then the Doberman thing, I threw that at him tonight. Hopefully I didn't blindside him too much, but I was looking through things and I saw that. I was like, I want to see this show, but you can't find it. It's nowhere to be found.
The pilots, they disappear. Somebody manages to have some VHS that they transferred onto YouTube or something. You're lucky.
And there's a small little piece of it on the YouTube, and I'm like, man, I'd love to find that entire episode. So anybody out there knows where that's at. If you got a copy, give me a yell. Heck, I'll upscale it to you for free because I have the software. So I would really appreciate that. It's a bunch of stuff there would be really cool to have or to watch. I miss.
You remember Run Joe Run by any chance?
What's that?
Do you remember Run Joe Run?
Oh yeah, one of my favorites.
I love that show.
Run Joe Run. I mean, you don't see that one anywhere either.
Oh yeah, it's not. I've looked for it. Yep. There's episodes online, but they're not. They don't have the complete season.
Yeah, Run Joe Run with the military and the dog and the German Shepherd. And,
Joe was falsely accused of attacking his trainer.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. You remember?
I used to love that show. It was basically they redid it later. Basically, called it The Incredible Hulk.
That's true. That is. You got a point.
Same premise.
Yep. Same premise.
Yeah.
Dag, thank you so much tonight. I mean, you're one of my idols because you've done so much in the art world. I mean, the VFX, the stuff that you do, also creates such a something it inspires us to want to write more stories. It's so, I wish I just had that much of your talent. Just that much is all I want. I'd want more, but I mean, if I could just become as good as you are in regards to some of the things that you do, it's fantastic. And I really appreciate the things that you've done for me, because you've gotten.
I'm still looking to try to find that sign. I
can't find it
anymore. So engrossed with Andor lately. I've been
that's a good one too.
I'm just like
this season's so much better.
Oh my God! The production design on that thing is mind blowing.
Yep.
But I've been meaning to scrub through the Defiance to find.
I'm gonna start another rewatch from beginning to end. I love the oh my God!
It's nice being on a show that I actually liked.
Yeah.
I've done a lot that
Castathans and and of course the
Arathians,
and then the vampire species.
What were they? I haven't watched it since it originally aired. I have all the DVDs or Blu-rays, but they gave them to us when we on the show.
Wow!
But
hopefully you got like a jacket too, like a VFX artist.
Yeah, we have a crew jacket, a crew sweater that we got for it. That I love actually. I'll have to show it to you sometime.
Yeah, show us that one too. I was just showing Dag tonight that I had actually bought this at Con in 2016.
I'll say I built a digital version of that. That's great. Is that, like I said, that's a fan or garage pit, obviously, right? That's not production. Yeah.
That's what somebody puts together.
They're out there filling that niche void of stuff that people would, normally go to production with.
Yeah. So those are the things that you've done, and Jack's done things, and it we all build on our you build on your own talents, but you also share those talents, whether you realize it or not, with the fans. The fans really love what you've done with certain shows, or they may not know who you are. They may not know that, hey, that was I'm the person that did X or did Y, and it's okay.
I'm like Jack. We don't do it for the narcissistic point. We do it for the. I mean, I know he does it for his craft too, but no one knows. We're the faceless,
the unsung hero. It's almost like the Fall Guy song,
Well, it's interesting because if you look at the history of like all the top earning films, okay, they're all VFX driven.
Oh yeah.
So it's like all the top ones, Star Wars, Star Trek, everything that comes down the pike. They're all VFX driven, so I'm just like, no one knows who these people are.
Oh yeah, you see the list usually to watch the movie, and now I pay attention because I know people of yourself or whatever else. I'll watch the credits at the end to see the tons of people who are listed as the VFX
the wall
artists.
of credits. That's what I was saying before. They're in blocks now, horizontal.
Holy
blocks.
cow! That's so many.
Too many of them. It's armies of people.
Yep.
I mean, the visual effects nowadays are just so. They're just so they're amazing. The last movie I just see, Thunderbolts. There's a New York scene, damage and carnage, and I'm just looking at this. I'm just going, wow. I'm just like, this is just amazing work.
But once again, thank you for coming on, and thank you everybody for being out there, because the fans do feel the fleet, and we will be back next Thursday. Same bad channel, same bad place. Thanks, Bert. Great. We look forward to hopefully listening to some of your video or watching some of your stuff on YouTube. And really, Dag, you were amazing for filling in. I really appreciate it, and
my pleasure.
We will see you guys next Thursday. If you don't, don't forget to hit the like buttons and the share buttons and everything else. And once again, IFB is not here for your money. We're not here for anything other than to inspire the fans and get the information out and honor those people who are behind the scenes, honor those people who are the ones that create those worlds by writing, by creating with VFX, by acting, by whatever it is. It's great to be honoring those people, because we need to remember them.
Let me just echo Jack's sentiment there too, Tipsy, is, we who do the work, it isn't worth anything without the fans.
That's
So there's an attitude of gratitude there. Because if people don't show up to watch it, then we're just making pretty pictures or whatever. So
Yep.
The fact that I've always said I make stuff for myself, but it's even better when other people enjoy it as much.
Yes.
So that's an added bonus to the whole dream, so to speak, living the dream.
That's it. Definitely. So for those people who are out there living the dream, thank you. We will see you next Thursday. And here's to you, Fans for the Fleet. I only got a little bit left. And by the way, I did dump that other one out while Bert was talking. Because it was definitely soapy there. There was something wrong with that one. So I'm sorry, Woodstock Brewhouse, but your review is soapy beer. It sucked. So anyways, see you next week. Thank you for everything, and Fans for the Fleet.
Good one, Bert.